Oh hey look! Another chapter of the Great Brony Migration! How about that? And so soon after my last reading of the Great Brony Migration. But I don't have anything to say beforehand, so let us just get on with it, shall we? So, the Great Brony Migration, Chapter 10/13. Day and Night. Serial Velocity trotted from the tent's gloomy interior into the slightly brighter gloom of an overcast sky. Thick charcoal-black clouds blotted out the sun and blanketed the sky over the camp, and only the camp. He could see, off in the distance, a bright halo where the dark clouds stopped and the sun ruled again. Luna's dark Gothic chariot squatted on the trampled grass of the clearing before the medical tent, like a predator crouching in the shadows. 4 strange ponies made a box around the chariot. They were of several colors, though a darker variety. It was as if they were perpetually in shadow, or had become that shadow. 2 of them sported leathery black wings, like bats. In place of manes, leathery webbed spines protruded from their heads that reminded Serial of fish. The other 2, flanking the dark vehicle, had crested ebony horns and gleamed darkly like their black armor. They regarded the gathered Bronies with steady gazes and impassive expressions. All around, the Bronies knelt to the dark princess standing on her chariot. The princess herself looked upon the crowd with benevolence, her proud neck arched and her head held high. A smile softened her features when Cyril and the others emerged from the tent and approached her. He could feel his shoulders relax from a tension he hadn't noticed when she looked at him. He and the others bowed to the princess. "Rise, all," Luna intoned. Oh hey, this next sentence reminds me that the other day I actually found out how her name is pronounced, and her being Fee. For the longest time I thought it was Foe, but I watched a video on her channel, I suppose, and she was playing Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past with a little mod that changed Link into Derpy. It was pretty awesome, and I heard her pronounce her name, and it's Fee. And for a while, I had no idea why it was pronounced Fee, but then it hit me. Of course, short for Phoebe. And then I felt like an idiot. So yeah, got a little off track slightly, but you learned something. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe I am just an idiot for thinking it was Foe for several months. Whatever, back to the story. So, yes, rise all, Luna intoned. Serial rose to find Fee peeking out from behind Luna's nebulous mane. The princess turned to her with a smile. "Thank you for riding with me, Fee. I enjoyed our conversation. Now, I am sure you are busy, so I will let you attend to your tasks." Alright, here Fee speaks. And now that I know what her voice sounds like, maybe I can imitate it. Maybe. But probably not.
"It was my pleasure, Princess,"
Fee replied, then jumped down from the chariot. She bowed her head as she walked past Serial, muttering,
"Serial Velocity."
She didn't meet his gaze. It hit him like a fist to the stomach. A yawning gulf had opened between them. He opened his mouth to speak to her, but she continued on, not even a glance back. "Serial Velocity, Twilight Sparkle, come hither," Luna commanded, and he dutifully obeyed, like an adoring puppy. Twilight also came forward, her face a mask of complacency. "Fee brought me word early this morning of what has been ailing my subjects." She looked at Cyril with an appraising eye, almost like a mother looking for anything amiss in her child. He called a distinct, "We must speak later," look in her eyes. She turned back to the ponies before her. "I also understand that those who have been lost are now found and on their way home. I commend you, Rainbow Dash, in your efforts in coordinating the search and finding them so quickly. When can we expect them?" Rainbow proudly thrust out her chest and preened under the praise. "They should be here in a few minutes, Princess," she declared. Luna beamed at the blue Pegasus. "Excellent. Now, Twilight and Serial, would you be so kind as to introduce me to your friend here?" She gestured with a hoof to the red unicorn quivering with excitement between where Twilight and Serial stood and where Rainbow sat proudly. At the mention of him, he sat bolt upright and froze, like a deer in headlights. "Of course, Princess Luna," Twilight said smoothly, giving Serial a worried glance when he said nothing. This is Lyconius, a scholar of languages from his world and a specialist in runes." "Very good, very good," Luna said with another smile. "Lyconius, come forward." The wide-eyed unicorn stood, laid his ears back, and shuffled forward a few feet, level with Cyril and Twilight. Luna chuckled softly. "You may come closer, don't be shy." He took a few more steps forward, trembling with his eyes stuck firmly on the princess. "Twilight said that you are a scholar of languages. How many languages are there from your world?" Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna try and imitate your voice, Lyconius. So, yeah. There. The red unicorn croaked, then cleared his throat and started over in a slightly stronger voice. "There are several thousand, Princess, but I'm only familiar with a few." Luna considered this for a moment, pursing her lips. "So many for one world. With which ones are you acquainted?" I specialize in the Germanic and Celtic families of languages. Old Norse, Old English, High Old German, Middle English, Modern English, High German, Low German, Schwabisch, I guess that's how you pronounce it, Welsh, Irish, and Scottish Gaelic, and Breton. I'm also fluent in Portuguese. He looked at the ground while he mumbled out the long list of languages. Luna nodded. "Impressive. Cyril tells me that you are able to quickly translate the pages from the ancient tome, and that you are able to tell that they came from different times. These are exactly the skills that will be required to unravel the mystery behind it, and some of the other writings that we have recently discovered. You will be accompanying me back to Canterlot and begin working on translation. Are you prepared?" Lyconius looked up at the princess and swallowed. "Yes, I am ready," he said in a small voice. "Very good." She looked up to the sky. She looked to the sky in the direction of the ever-free. "Ah, the lost ones return. Rainbow Dash, please escort them here to my chariot and find the ones responsible for locating them. I wish to congratulate them personally and commend all who participated in the search." "Yes, Princess," Rainbow saluted and shot into the sky. The crowd of Bronies had been growing steadily as Luna conversed with those in front of her. Cyril looked around at all the multicolored pastel ponies he had brought with him to this world. What did they think of this place? How did they feel about a world governed by laws they couldn't begin to understand? Responsibility weighted on him like a mountain, constantly pressing. No respite, no mercy. One false step, one wrong direction, even just a teeter in the wrong direction, and it would crush him without a moment's hesitation. Did it really matter? He thought. Was he really in control? His chest felt empty. His breath sighed through a cavern growing colder with each passing day. His mind felt numb. What was happening to him? What little warmth remained in him struggled to stay alight. The way Fee did not meet his gaze. Sethisto's indifference. They were gales of winter wind vying to snuff out the guttering flame of his soul. Everywhere he looked, faces looked back, happy, it would seem. Did they feel it? Cyril looked back to Luna, surprised that she was also looking at him. Her gaze drew him in, coaxing him back from a precipice he knew he was approaching. Believe. The word tolled in his ears like a gigantic church bell. Believe. Warmth flooded his limbs. Like an embrace, it enveloped his chest, melting away the cold feeling of dread that had settled there. The sound of rushing water filled his ears. How? There was no river near. He blinked. Luna wasn't looking at him. Instead, she was gazing at the sky, a smile on her lips. The crowd cheered all around him. He blinked again, finally looking away from the princess into the direction of her interest. He was suddenly in the company of Twilight, Rarity, Applejack, Fluttershy, and Lyconius. His head jerked around like a startled bird as he reformed his bearings. Fee and Sethisto sat a ways off, next to the dark vehicle, cheering with the rest of the Bronies. Over 200 Pegasi flew in formation over the dark canopy of the Everfree Forest, arrayed in companies of 50 and flying in classic double V. The first company broke down the center, banking away to either side of the crowd as they came under the blanket of dark clouds. The next company followed suit, and then the next, and the next. The ground shook with the impact of their hooves as they came cantering to a stop from their flight. A few larger shapes detached themselves from the main body and disappeared into the crowd. Two large, but sleek, silver chariots floated behind teams of 4 Pegasi each. The first chariot descended, Rainbow Dash leading the team. As soon as the silver-spoked wheels touched the ground, Twilight and her friends galloped to the chariot and tackled the pink pony, barely giving her a chance to hop out of the coach. The ensuing group hug was so adorable that, even in its melancholy, Serial felt the corners of his mouth twist up in a smile. He glanced over to Lyconius, who looked upon the scene with a rather goofy smile splitting his face. A soft, "ah," and even a few giggles rippled around the bronies nearest the front of the crowd. Pinkie laughed with her friends, a high-pitched combination of a giggle and a maniacal cackle. Finally, the hug broke up. Twilight held Pinkie out at arm's length and got her first good look at the pink party pony. Twilight gasped at her friend. "Pinkie, what in Equestria happened to you?" Serial peered closer at Pinkie. She was looking a bit scruffy and dirty. Her coat was rough and matted with huge snarls in her mane and tail. He could make out a large bruise on her shoulder, and she had a slightly swollen cheek and puffy eye. Pinkie blushed. "Oh, getting into trouble is all. I'm fine. Really, I am. I can't tell you how good it is to see all of you. We should throw a party." Twilight had let go of Pinkie, letting her sit on her own. Though there was plenty of enthusiasm in her words, her voice was subdued, tired, drawn. She swayed from side to side with drooping ears and heavy-lidded eyes. She looked as tired as Serial felt, but she still smiled from ear to ear, though it was interrupted by her puffy cheek. Twilight laughed. "Oh, Pinkie Pie, how about we throw a slumber party later?" "That sounds good to me," Pinkie chirped. Other ponies started climbing out of the chariots, aided by the Pegasi who pulled them. Serial felt his eyes pop as he saw why they needed help out of the vehicles. There weren't many of them, 6 total, but not a single one was free of a bandage of some kind. A blue unicorn had a wrap on his horn and around his head. A flaxen Pegasus looked like he had several burns across his neck and chest. A pastel rose Pegasus stepped gingerly to the ground. Her chest was bound up in wide strips of cloth, with one wing in a splint. A still gray Pegasus, with a black and white striped mane and tail, had half of his face in a bandage. 2 blue Pegasi hopped out of the chariot. One, with a spiky powder blue mane, favored his right foreleg, his hoof and a leg in a bandage. The other blue Pegasus limped with a large bandage around his chest. They looked like they had just barely survived a battle. Where could they have been for 2 days to come back looking like that? A hush rippled through the crowd as the lost ponies gathered around Luna's chariot. A cold, sinking feeling came over him as he watched. Every single one was tired, beaten, and faded. Serial remembered seeing the blue unicorn before. He wasn't as gray as the others, but he was definitely a few shades lighter than what he remembered. Movement to his left startled Serial. Luna had stepped down from her chariot and approached the ragtag group. The battered bronies attempted to bow to her, but she thrust a hoof forward to forestall them. "You need not bow, my little ponies." The bronies straightened awkwardly. Luna gazed at them, a frown tugging at her lips. "My sister, Princess Celestia of the Sun, tells me that you are lost in the Everfree. Pray tell, what befell you there?" The group looked at each other furtively like a bunch of children caught sneaking out of the house at night. "We, made some friends and—" Pinkie finally piped up, holding a hoof under her chin as she searched for the right words to say. "Oh, we had a disagreement with the troll, too." Luna took a few more steps forward. "You say you met with a troll, Pinkie Pie? You are certain of this?" Pinkie nodded. "At least, that's what Lexicon said it was called." "Where's this Lexicon? May I speak with him?" Luna did not sound as if she doubted Pinkie. Seal even saw her nod in recognition of the term. She did sound worried, though. He's very sick. They took him to the hospital, I think." "Did he turn gray, Pinkie? Did he shiver as if cold?" Twilight asked in a subdued voice. Pinkie Pie blinked. "Yeah, he was really weak. Could barely walk. Do you know what it is?" Luna bent down to speak with those gathered around her. "It is the onus," she said, too quiet for the crowd to hear. Cyril had a hard time hearing her, and he was only a few feet from the princess. Time grows short. This reaction, however, is not what it should be. Something is terribly amiss, and I feel that the answer lies in the ancient tome we found. The princess straightened and spoke again with a more normal tone. I look forward to hearing about your adventure in the Everfree, but I see that you are very weary from your travel. It warms my heart to see my little ponies here, safe once more. She smiled at the bandaged Bronies, and then at the crowd in general. Rainbow Dash, who am I to thank for rendering such service to me? Rainbow stood and trotted to the edge of the crowd directly in front of the princess. The pastel ponies parted for the cerulean speed demon to reveal a pair of griffins. One was brown with eagle coloring. The other was a raven black with a striped speckled crest on his head. They stood as if rooted to the ground. Rainbow gestured them forward with a hoof and a smile. As the two griffins stepped into the clearing, the crowd applauded by stomping on the ground. A few even shouted, "Vivat Nocte!" The eagle-colored one smiled at the calls. While the Bronies were celebrating, the atmosphere around Luna changed dramatically. Serial watched as her expression hardened at the sight of the griffins. With every step forward they took, he could swear the air grew colder. He glanced around at the others, but they didn't seem to notice the change in Luna's countenance. Rainbow bowed again to Luna, then held a hoof out, gesturing the eagle-colored Bronies. "This is Lezelan," she gestured to the Raven Griffin, "and this is Garrett. They're the ones who found Pinky and the others." As they were introduced, the two bowed to the princess. She turned to Serial. "How is it that these are griffins, Serial Velocity?" she asked in a cold, direct voice. He blinked at the question. The device that we used to become ponies had the ability to produce other races as well, princess. Not everyone wanted to be ponies. There are a few griffins and minotaurs, and I believe there's at least one dragon among us." "So, these are also from your world," she said mostly to herself. She turned back to the griffins, her eyebrow rising when she found that they bowed still. "Lezelan, Garrett, ye may rise." They obeyed. Luna stepped to the side, walking slowly around the pair. "Tell me, why is it that ye have chosen to be griffins? Dost thee know that they are a kind far different from us? And why do you subject yourselves to me?" "We always knew that we were griffins at heart, princess," Lezelan said, looking at the ground and speaking in a respectful, almost reverent tone. "And you, Garrett?" "The same, my princess," the Raven Griffin replied in the same tone as Lezelan. Luna sniffed, rounding them again. "Why am I thy princess? What of me dost thou know that convinced thee to accept my rule?" Lezelan's face tightened. "Because you are, princess. We love you, for who you are and what you have done." "And what have I done for thee, Lezelan?" the princess asked quietly. The brown and white griffin hesitated, but his raven friend spoke in the silence. "You inspired us, princess." Lezelan nodded to this. "Yes, you inspire us with your strength and kindness, princess. If you required it of me, I would give my life for you." He bowed his head again to her. "If there is anything I can say to convince you, tell me, and I will say it. You are our princess." Luna stepped back and regarded the two Brony griffins. "Your sentiments will not go over well with your native kin. The griffins are not fond of me. We share an unfortunate history. If your loyalty is as strong as you claim, they will not welcome you. You forever alienate yourselves from your own kind. If that means we can serve you, princess, I don't care. Let them hate us." Lezelan placed a claw over his heart. Garrett did the same. "Lezelan, stand," she said sternly. The griffin stood, bravely gazing up at the princess. Luna lowered her head, lightly touching his right shoulder with her horn. "Lezelan, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. For returning my beloved ponies to me, you have my undying gratitude." She straightened and turned to the other griffin. "Garrett, stand," she said in the same solemn tone. The Raven Griffin obeyed. Luna again lowered her horn to tap the Raven Griffin's shoulder gently. "Garrett, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. For returning my beloved ponies to me, you have earned my undying gratitude." The princess straightened, taking a few steps back. The two griffins could barely contain the smiles on their faces as they swept another bow to the dark alicorn. Luna nodded to them and mounted her chariot, standing tall on the platform. "My little ponies," she raised her hoof to her subjects, "fear not, for thy princess sees and hears you. This ailment from which you suffer shall not claim you, for I have claimed you. Fear not the darkness. Rejoice in the light. I am thy princess and shall not fail you." Her last resounding word was met with a roar as the Bronies cheered. The earth shook again as they pounded with their hooves. The princess turned back to those gathered in the space before her chariot. At a nod from Luna, Fee took to the air and Seth disappeared into the crowd. "Cyril, Lycaonius, come. We must make haste to Canterlot." Though she spoke in a normal tone, her words cut through the noise of the crowd as if she stood next to them. He and Lycaonius trotted to the chariot as the back-winged nocturne Pegasi stepped into the harnesses. With the red and gray unicorns on her left and right, the nocturne unicorn's horns glowed with azure magic. Silver trumpets appeared before them after they stepped into places in the rear of the vehicle. A strangely harmonic yet dissonant chord reverberated over the crowded bronies. The chariot lifted from the clearing and entered the inky billow of cloud, shrouding them in mist. "This is just too cool," Lycaonius whispered. Starlight bathed the dusty granite walls of the vault. 3 bright spheres hovered around the standing stone in the center of the large chamber, casting a cold bluish-white light on the ancient scarred stone. Luna stood in the entrance of the vault, watching the red unicorn she brought with her pour over the walls. He whispered to himself as he ran a hoof over the symbols. Exhaustion beat upon her as he valiantly stayed on her hooves. Her unusual diurnal activities these past few days were taking their due toll on her body. Stepping into the daylight burned her skin as she constantly felt hungry. Her weariness was nothing compared to the seething fear set in her by these silent walls. The red unicorn's whisper melded with hissing accusations at the very edge of her perception. Her guilt intensified the nearer she came to the vault, as if the stone in the center of the room were the fulcrum of a great lever, crushing her under duty of a millennium neglected. Time and time again her gaze was drawn, like iron shavings to a lodestone, to one certain symbol. It was a single vertical line crossed by 3 diagonal lines that called to her. She tried not to stare at it. Lycaonius muttered to himself as he turned from one wall to another, crossing the room. They had been there for only a few moments. His books still rested on his back in a pair of strange saddlebags made from some curious black fabric. Lines of a shiny dark interlocking metal sealed several pouches shut. Other pieces of what looked like the same dark metal clinked softly as he moved about. Luna quietly observed, biding her time and letting him get acquainted with his work. Everywhere she looked, she could pick out that symbol from among its peers. The rest of the rooms melded into a morass of lines indistinguishable from one another. The Princess of the Night was not made to rule the day. This much was certain. She fought to keep her eyes open, her mind flitting from one thing to another, yet always returning to that symbol. It seemed to burn on the walls like an iron heated to incandescence. "Princess?" Lycaonius was suddenly in front of her. He sat with his eyes on the ground in front of him. His saddlebags rested near the standing stone, a few of their contents placed next to the ancient pillar. She blinked. When had he had the chance to remove them? She focused on the diffident young stallion before her. You look tired, Your Highness. I can begin work on translating the carvings on the standing stone, if you wish, if you need to rest." He fidgeted where he sat. Luna smiled at him. "I understand," she said softly. "Do I make you nervous?" No, Princess. I enjoy your company. It's just that—" Luna chuckled. "Do not worry, my little pony. I am not used to being so active during the day is all. I stay, for I am the only one who can sustain the starlights." She gestured to the orbs of light hovering around the stone. "Oh." Lycaonius adjusted the square of spectacles on his nose and glanced back at the lights. After a moment, he squinted at the large iron cauldrons around the room. "What are those?" "They look like big braziers or something." He trotted over to one. Luna sat down with a sigh. I'm afraid that whatever magic caused them to light the first time I was here has dissipated. He reared up on his hind legs to place his forehooves on the rim of the cauldron next to the entrance. He cocked his head to the side. There's an inscription here, he mumbled. Luna joined him next to the old iron basin. The red unicorn sidled around the edge of it, running his hoof along the ring of brass, deeply engraved with more runes. Luna narrowed her eyes at the engraving, looking from it to the carvings on the wall. Lycaonius, she tapped the ring of brass. This is different from the carvings on the walls, and those differ from the carvings on the stone in the center of the chamber. Why is this? Age and function, he said in a distracted tone. The standing stone is much older than the carvings on the walls. The stone itself isn't even part of the mountain. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that it came from someplace else entirely. It was exposed to the elements at one point, but has been here for a very, very long time. Luna moved out of the way as he started going around the cauldron, eyes fixed on the engraving. She tapped a hoof on the floor. Does this mean that the wall carvings were added later, along with the cauldrons? Lycaonius paused, holding a hoof under his chin. Not necessarily. The cauldrons, I think, have been here, maybe not as long as the stone, but they were definitely here before the carvings were made. He tapped the ring. These engravings serve another purpose. This is a form of magic, called inscription, that the mystics use for various things. This one is meant to provide heat and light, or fire, one of the principal elements, but it had been modified to require a trigger. He motioned with a hoof for her to look closer. She did so. You just have to know what rune to touch. He held a hoof up to one symbol. It was slightly larger than the others. A long straight line, going from the inside edge of the ring to the outside edge, had 6 other lines branching from it, all pointed at the outside edge. The scholar traced the symbol with the tip of his hoof, just as Cyril had done to open the vault. Before he traced the last branch, he paused. Princess, you may want to step back. He leaned away from the cauldron. Luna backed away a few steps. Lycaonius finished tracing the rune and leapt away from the cauldron. A great roar erupted from the basin as blue fire filled it to the brim. The cauldrons, on their pedestals of onyx, roared to life all around them. Luna laughed at the spectacular display of power. Written spells, she whispered to the walls. Well, she turned to the red unicorn. Now that you won't be left in the dark, I suppose I may retire. Come to me in the throne room after dusk. She went over to the back wall of the vault. Before I take my leave, however, she raised a hoof to the wall, touching the strange symbol that burned to her sight. Can you tell me what this symbol means? Lycaonius approached. He took one look at the rune. That is a stacked rune. Its name is Nadis, or Need. Why? She dropped her hoof. I suppose it looked familiar somehow, she said. Her hushed voice echoed back to her. One word in particular seemed emphasized in every retelling. Familiar. Luna shut the door to her private chambers a few minutes later. The trek from the vault to her rooms was not but a vague impression of white halls and blinding sunlight. Heavy black curtains covered the windows of her room, letting in only a faint hint of light near the tiled floor. She sighed in the gloom, slowly initiating her surrender to the demands of sleep. The princess didn't look at the wonderfully crafted furniture from the carpenters in Trottingham. She didn't see how graceful curves of the exotic dark wood imitated a style from over 1,000 years ago, and how it attempted to bring her solace. Familiar. Every night that passed was supposed to make the pain grow faint. Time has a way of mending injuries. But was there any way to heal a broken heart? Song reference. Her crown lifted from her head in a blue cloud of magic, coming to rest on a vanity expertly carved with doves in flight. Her shoes fell from her hooves, making hollow thunks as they hit the thick rug, woven with spirals of various shades of blue. The royal necklace that bore the mark of the crescent moon settled next to her crown, a cold weight. She had cried herself to sleep too many mornings since she learned of what became of her children. A decade does not seem long at all when you can remember the beginnings of all things. Another sigh danced through the air that was not her own. The dark princess went to the side of her bed, a little smile gracing her lips as she looked upon the grey unicorn sleeping there. The smile faded. She had done him a great disservice. He had no idea what was happening to him, why it was happening. She had shamefully taken advantage of his ignorance and trust. But if she had the opportunity to do it again, she would do the same. Every time. The bond, unfortunately, was flawed. Luna was still surprised at how she was able to slip the spell in right under Celestia's nose. The fact that he was beginning to mirror her moves was unexpected. His habits were changing, his body adjusting to her influence. She shouldn't have sent him away from her so soon. Familiar. There was something about these Bronies, the way they accepted her so readily, how they looked upon her with such respect and adoration. She lifted a hoof and brushed aside a lock of blue hair from Serial's face. He reminded her of a few of her sons, now long gone. Familiar. Fee, the witty white Pegasus, reminded her of a few of her daughters, also gone. She was sure that if she took the time to know any of the Bronies, they would likely share a trait with many of her foals. Luna trudged through a bog of weariness to reach the other side of the bed. She lay on soft pillows, feeling the warmth of the unicorn next to her. Familiar. Too tired to cry, she closed her eyes to confront specters of the past. Familiar. Fluttershy found herself hovering around the large hospital tent. In the hours after Princess Luna's departure, she had spoken to no less than 200 Bronies. She tried to keep count at first, if only to occupy herself with something mundane to keep from dwelling too much on their problems. But dwell she did. The number didn't matter. Twilight seemed to put great store in numbers and such, but Fluttershy had never understood what they did exactly. In the years that she had been friends with the studious purple unicorn, she had learned a lot about what made the world work. But something so cold as numbers could never tell the same tale she heard from these kindred souls from another world. They were frightened. Truth be told, so was she. For some reason, they gravitated to her. They looked on her with soulful eyes such to put even the most adorable creature to shame. But what they held in their eyes differed greatly from any creature she had ever cared for. They were haunted. Some even felt hunted by their past. They wanted to be safe. They wanted to be happy. They wanted to hear her tell them that they would be. A shuffling of hooves startled her. Sorry, Miss Fluttershy. An earth pony stallion, grey as winter's dusk, shivered in the long shadows of the summer evening. I didn't mean to startle you. His teeth chattered in his head, and his legs wobbled as if made from flimsy rubber. It was a wonder he hadn't collapsed by now. Fluttershy quickly ducked beside him, throwing a wing over his back and lending a supportive shoulder. That's all right. You didn't startle me. Come here. Let's get you a nice warm bed. Does that sound good? She had no idea if her soft words connected to him at all. He gazed forlornly at the trampled grass, moving weakly with her as she started walking to the front of the large white tent. Far too many of them were appearing like this, drained of color, shivering, lost. She swallowed lumps in her throat constantly, trying to appear brave for them. Is everything going to be all right, Fluttershy? He whispered. Princess Luna knows what's happening. She can help us. Fluttershy swallowed another lump and smiled at him. Of course, you're going to be fine. The princess knows what to do. Her words seemed to make him relax a little. He didn't look at everything with his empty expression as before. She didn't like doing it, but sometimes being kind meant you had to lie. A deep red unicorn walked slowly down the crepuscular halls of Canterlot Castle. He muttered under his breath as he walked, periodically shaking his head as if arguing with himself. The carvings on the walls of the vault made little sense, even to his practiced eye. He could read them, but the meanings were slippery at best. It all felt like prose and smacked of prophecy. The ancient carvers used a strange hodgepodge of styles, and even the carvings themselves looked like cobbled together from several different eras. There were elements of the younger Futhark interspersed with the elder, Bind runes and stacking, alliteration and illusion, is very confusing and troubling. He did not understand the entirety of what it was saying, but what he did understand made his stomach turn somersaults. Lyconius was so absorbed in his thoughts that he barely gave a second glance to the breathtaking beauty of the hall. He passed beneath the gazes of glass heroes and villains, unperturbed. The fact that no guard stopped him before he nearly ran to the great doors of the throne room jerked him out of his deep thought. Where are the guards? Ah, it was dusk. The changing of the guard had only just begun, and the nocturne guard had not yet arrived. He raised a hoof to knock on the great door, but let it fall. Voices, angelic in the echoing chamber, seeped through. "Sister, we must commune." That was Luna. She sounded agitated. "Of course, Luna, speak your mind," came Celestia's calm response. "No, Celestia. Even this tongue, refined as it may be, is vulgar, and will not convey what I must impart." Luna's tone began to waver. She sounded almost desperate. "Please, let us join our thoughts. It has been too long." Celestia spoke in a flat tone, as if this were an old argument. "Speaking will suffice." "No, it will not suffice. These words have not the strength to explain what I feel, Celestia. Why do you fear us?" There was a pause. "I do not fear us, Luna. But remember what happened when last we were too dependent on each other. I cannot bear to allow it to happen again." "So you would push me away? You would choose to be alone when now, after so long, I am here? A decade, Celestia. 100th of my exile passed away, and yet I feel a stranger still. I beg you, let us be as we once were, happy, sisters united. Please." The last word was only a whisper. "I cannot," was Celestia's steely reply. "You mean you will not?" Luna spat. "It will do us no good." Celestia's weary voice lost its usually melodic quality. Luna gnashed her teeth. "Always you say this," she muttered. "Because it is true, Luna. Now speak your mind. I will always listen," Celestia entreated in a soft voice. Hoofsteps clicked metallically behind the door, as if one of them paced back and forth. "If you insist," Luna said curtly. The pacing continued, accompanied by a few huffs. Luna was very agitated, it seemed. "I fear something is wrong with the vault, sister." "Impossible," Celestia said flatly. "Hear me out. I see the carvings in the vault, the script of that tome, even the writings of the Bronies, and I feel that something is missing. I remember." The pacing slowed and finally stopped. Lyconius leaned in closer to the door. "I remember the humans," she whispered. "Yes." Celestia drew the word out, as if uncertain of what Luna meant. "I remember them as well. Why does this trouble you?" "Because it is all wrong. I remember what they looked like. I remember being with them. But I cannot recall their voices. I cannot recall their touch, the presence." Luna's voice quivered with fear or sorrow. Which it was, he could not tell. Perhaps both. Celestia remained silent. "In my dreams, I see their faces. They smile at me. They look to me. They plead with me. They kneel before me." Luna's voice rose in intensity as she continued, the words spilling out on top of each other. "They accuse me. I see in their eyes dire need, but I cannot remember if I filled them. I cannot remember if I answered them. I cannot remember if I served them. They are gone. Why are they gone, Celestia?" Luna's final wail rent the air like thunder and shook the stone beneath Lyconius's hooves. He should not be here. "Shh, shh, shh. Hush, sister," Celestia cooed. Sniffles and tiny gasps echoed in the other chamber. "Nightmares these only be. The humans are gone because they were mortal, sister." Her breath caught in her throat, a waver entering her voice as well. "I can imagine how it feels to see so much change, and I know you hurt for the loss of your children. But the humans, they moved on, Luna. We did what was needed for them. Do not fret. Hush. Be still. But, it is as if they did not exist. We have no other records, only these tattered memories. Why has this happened to us? What did we do? Tell us, Celestia. Our life, it feels empty. We work and do and plan, but for what? Goosebumps ravaged the red unicorn's skin as he listened to Luna slip into the old speech. He no longer knew if she spoke only of herself or for both. Uneasily, he pushed aside a dreadful thought. Was Nightmare Moon still there? Much was lost when Canterlot burned, sister. Celestia spoke softly, but her words rang hard as solid steel. Thou couldst have restored it, Luna mumbled. When Celestia did not respond, she spoke louder. Thou couldst have restored it. Thou couldst have taught them to remember. There was a rustling of wings, and the metallic steps resumed again. But lo, my children dwindle and vanish. My presence is forgotten, and you hide me and mine away, she growled. Do not suppose I did this to spite you, Luna. Celestia's word carried an edge he had never heard before. Is that how thou wouldst twist my sight, Celestia? Luna was furious. I would leave well enough alone if I were thee, Celestia cautioned ominously. So what should we do? Tell us, how could the brightest light cast the darkest shadow? How long are we to writhe in the dark? How far must we go to find closure? Enough! The royal Canterlot voice exploded from the room, throwing the doors open and knocking Lyconius off his hooves. Before the door swung shut once more, he caught a glimpse of the sisters locked eye to eye. Energy coursed around them like silent lightning for a brief moment. Then all went still. I will take my leave for this night, Luna, Celestia rasped. I am sorry, Celestia. I went too far. I should not have accused you. No, I am sorry. Fare thee well this night, sister. Hoofsteps rang on the marble and approached the door. Lyconius's heart started to race. Hoofsteps sounded behind him, two shadows falling on the wall of the adjoining hall. He scrambled to his hooves and trotted as softly as he could to one of the massive tree-like pillars. He wedged himself between the wall and the pillar just as the doors to the throne room were enveloped in golden magic. Celestia's slow advance echoed down the hall. He tried his best to slow his breathing so it didn't wheeze through his nostrils. The other hoofsteps stopped. Good evening, Princess. Two deep male voices greeted in unison. Good evening. Be vigilant as always. Celestia seemed to speak by rote. Her words were hollow, though her voice carried none of the weariness or defeat that it had a moment before. We shall, Princess, the two guards muttered respectfully. Celestia continued her slow, stately advance, not stopping when she spoke to the guards. The other set of hoofsteps began again and continued to the great doors. Lyconius's blood pounded in his ears. What had he heard? Strife between the night and day? Luna, distraught over things she could not remember? Could it be that Celestia feared the return of Nightmare Moon? He took a cautious peek around the pillar. Celestia was nowhere to be seen. Lyconius heaved a sigh of relief, turning back to walk behind the pillars, and came face to face with Celestia. His mind reeled, eyes widening in shock. Invisible bands suddenly clamped his mouth shut, muffling the surprised yelp in his throat. More invisible cords tightened around his legs and body, holding him in place. So, you are the one they call Lyconius. She gazed into his eyes, speaking in a flat tone that sent cold shivers down his spine. I have many questions for you. The golden aura of magic around her horn brightened. All of reality seemed to warp around him, tearing itself apart to reveal an abyss of endless emptiness. Another muffled scream shook in his throat, and the world disappeared. Well, there you have it. Chapter 10 of the Great Brony Migration. So yes, that ending. Discuss it in the comments. Whether it be in my comments or on his comments, I care not. I know a couple people are like, oh, Molestia. And although it would be quite funny if Lyconius did that, I'm really fairly certain he won't. But yeah, If you enjoyed it, comment, rate, subscribe, all of that stuff. And until next time, farewell.